All right, it is a Georgia game week, and Arkansas State coming between the hedges this week. Do you know what Arkansas State's mascot is? Pop quiz. Give you a second to think about it. Don't look it up. It's the Red Wolves, and it's not just the Wolves, it's the Red Wolves. And I think that might just be a fox. I've never seen a red wolf, but that's what they're called, man. And if you have an animal like a wolf and you have to give it a color description, a wolf needs no help. But they went ahead and helped it out anyway and gave it a red color, which is pretty intimidating. So the Red Wolves of Arkansas State are coming into Athens this weekend to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. And they don't have a color associated with their name, just Bulldogs, and that's okay too. But you got to watch out for those Red Wolves because they are that team that will kind of come in and scare you a little bit. Probably not scare you as much as an actual Red Wolf would, but here we are. It is week 3 for Georgia, and as I typically do each and every week, sit down and after our press conference availability with Kirby Smart and some of the Georgia Bulldogs football players on Monday, sit down and record a little conversation. And this is that Georgia Game Week conversation. Myself, Wes Blankenship, on Look Alive Podcast, the 11 Alive Sports Podcast, which is the NBC affiliate in Atlanta, Georgia. So go ahead and check that out and give this episode a listen. I know there's not a whole lot to break down for Georgia and Arkansas State. There's not a whole lot to break down for Georgia and Murray State, but we will talk about how you can look at the ways Jeremy Pruitt acted at Georgia and how it's an indicator for how his program right now is going off the rails. Roddy has some pretty good insight on that, and we'll also talk about just how good these Georgia freshmen are and where they stack up against some of the other freshmen that Roddy's seen through the years. Roddy's covered a lot of these guys up through the ranks as they were recruits and eventually became players. And so he has a lot of good information there and a lot of stuff that you might not know about this year's team. So you'll also hear from Kirby Smart. You'll hear from Trey Hill and David Marshall as every single person tries to deny the fact that they aren't thinking about Notre Dame just yet. Notre Dame's coming up next week. Georgia's been at least a 3-touchdown favorite against every team they've played so far. They covered against Vandy. They did not cover against Murray State. I told y'all they wouldn't cover against Murray State. Told you they wouldn't cover against Vandy. So I'm 1-1, just like Georgia is. And once again, Georgia's, when I'm recording this, they're 33-point favorites. I'll say Georgia will cover this week. I'll go ahead and say that they will. They want to tune things up. They want to be as crisp as possible going into this Notre Dame game. So I think Georgia will cover. They might not look fancy doing it, but I think they'll kind of step up and really show why they're the number 3 team in the country this week. And speaking of those rankings, we'll also at the very end of the episode talk about some early playoff seedings. And LSU, one of those teams that's really starting to shake things up, and some really early hypotheticals as to what could happen down the road in the SEC. But enough of that. Here's my conversation with Roddy Nabulsi on Look Alive Podcast. All right, Roddy, Georgia taking on Arkansas State this week. Big win over Murray State. Once again, more than a 3-touchdown favorite. Georgia's 1-1 against the spread right now. I'm not really surprised they didn't cover against Murray State. That was a huge spread, but it's kind of getting tough for us as we start the season now with like these 3 lopsided matchups.
Yeah, it's a situation where you don't know what you have. I mean, you do know you have the number 3 team in the nation. So that's why you see spreads of 49 points, 33 points, big spreads. You're loaded. You've had the number 1 recruiting class the last 2 years. Since Kirby's been here, he has taken the depth up and down the roster and made it very, very pleasing to the eye. If you're like, wow, just look at those. They look like the number 3 team in the country. Have they played that way? Well, they scored 63 points last week. He said, yeah, of course they have. Well, but you had that lull against Vanderbilt. Yeah. You had a slow start against Murray State. Arkansas State's going to come in. They're not going to test you that much. So you really, I want to say you don't know what you have. I mean, you know what you have. I'll say it this way. You don't know what how they're going to perform in the big games. You know what you have, which is a team that can go out there, give half an effort, and win these games easily. What will it be like when they're facing a Notre Dame? What will it be like when they're facing, Auburn, Florida, South Carolina, other bigger teams? I mean, and even Kirby in his post-game remarks mentioned how going up against Murray State is like, he wasn't being mean to him, but he said they're an inferior opponent. Murray State's not supposed to come in and test Georgia, and they didn't. So you really don't know what this team's going to be like facing true pressure, true adversity. We have not seen that yet. And I know that you have all these great players, but Georgia's had great players in the past. And every once in a while there's a game they lose or a series that puts them back too far. So I guess we're still waiting. And even after this week, I think we'll still be waiting to see what Georgia has.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's one of my favorite things about Kirby's press conferences is that he'll actually admit, like, listen, Murray State, I know that we had to respect them because we're playing them this week.
Yeah.
But their offensive line is not as good as the teams we're going to play each week, and everybody knows that. But I think it gets a little bit old to hear a coach say otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. When you see, we're asking about Nolan Smith, Nolan Smith coming in off the edge. He's like, yeah, he did a great job. He'll have to do that against bigger, faster, stronger offensive tackles, which he'll see this week. He'll see, and he mentioned in today's press conference, he'll see better offensive tackles this week.
Nolan's smart. Nolan listens. So when you give Nolan a plan and say, this is the way I want you to rush on this defense, or this is the way I want you to rush on this particular tackle, he does it. He applies what he learns, and he plays with just maximum effort. I mean, he just is like a wild man, hair on fire. I'm never over, and a lot of football is effort. It's not, you can take 10 5-stars and 10 3-stars, and you go out there and put one other guy on the team to make 11, and the team that plays hardest usually finds a way to win the game. And that's what Nolan does, man. He plays hard. And that makes football important to him. It allows us to play him in a lot of situational football. He's got to continue to do that because he's going to get matched up on better and better, just like this week. He's going to play better tackles than he played last week. So he's got to use his skill set, he's got to use his trade, and he's got to understand how the defense is engineered to make it work.
He'll see much better offensive tackles against Notre Dame. So it's you got to be pleased with what you've seen, but I give Kirby Smart all the credit in the world. I complain as much as anybody about lack of access to the program. I want it for our readers at UGAsports.com. I want us to be able to sit in on the meetings, the lunches, everything. We want as much information as possible, and Kirby doesn't give it to us. But when Kirby is available and you ask him a question, he doesn't hold back. He doesn't sugarcoat things. He'll tell. He's talking about one of his players, and he says, "Hey, this kid's good, but here's what he does wrong." And a lot of coaches won't do that. They paint a very rosy picture or they filibuster. But Kirby gives us answers, and may not always be the answer you want to hear that, oh, yeah, Nolan looked great, but let's see what he does against somebody who's, on his level. And that's the most factual answer he could give. So, hats off to Kirby for, like you say, calling Murray State, not calling them out, but calling them not a true test.
For what they are.
For what they are. Don't tell us Murray State are, dragon killers. They're not. They're Murray State.
All right, on the flip side of that, it is Arkansas State week.
Right.
Kirby and the players asked multiple times, are you working on Notre Dame at all yet?
Nobody in our building is going to be working on Notre Dame this week. We won't have anybody working on Notre Dame this week. That's not our focus. I got too much respect for this team and too much respect for how they play. We're not working on Notre Dame this week.
That's all we got to do, just stay focused on them. We're really not worried about Notre Dame right now. Just focus on Arkansas State and just dialing in on those guys. Those guys are a pretty good team.
Just staying focused, just worry about the team we playing now, worry about Arkansas State. It's just too many people don't talk about other teams like that on campus. We just focus on one team. That's it.
And this is an area where I think Kirby may be kind of hiding something a little bit, right? Because there has to be somebody kind of sneaking a peek at the Irish.
Absolutely. And he mentioned, I think it was last year, said, they spent one section of practice, each day or at least each week working on Georgia Tech, getting ready for that triple option. He said you can't just wait till the game week to prepare for the triple option. So they worked on it in spring, they worked on it in fall camp, then they worked on it once a week or at least once a day sometimes, throughout the season, getting ready for that game. You cannot tell me that Kirby Smart, somewhere in the spring, somewhere in the 28 practices before the first game, somewhere in these last few weeks, they haven't had scout team, run this that looks just like what Notre Dame does.
Do you think the players know that? You think they know that's what they're doing?
I wouldn't. Well, why would he not do that? Hey, here's what we're going to see against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
You're not going to see this this week against Vanderbilt,
Right.
unless they line up in the same thing. But hey, let's work on that Notre Dame front seven.
Yeah.
But again, okay, maybe they're not doing it this week. But that doesn't mean he didn't say they didn't do it last week or they didn't do it in the fall camp, especially when you got those 28 days, and then you got the 15 days in the spring. Why not say, hey, okay, today's Florida Day, today's Auburn Day, today's South Carolina Day, today, if your scout team can handle it, but at least introduce them to the concepts that they're going to see and that they're going to work on.
Yeah, just start getting those pathways carved out in their minds as they start to practice for Notre Dame. And like we've seen Tennessee now drop that game to Georgia State. And Jeremy Pruitt blew my mind when he admitted that they overlooked Georgia State. You cannot overlook anybody these days.
Yeah, but when you're so, in your mind, so far ahead of a team, you're like, their defensive end versus my offensive tackle, that is a win for my offensive tackle, 99 plays out of 100. Their wide receiver versus my cornerback is going to lock him down, and you start looking at the matchups, and where are we advantaged and where are they advantaged? And when they don't have any advantages or maybe one, or it's a push when it comes to the kicker, you're like, okay, we got this. And then let's be honest, every coach is a little confident in their abilities or they wouldn't be a coach. You can't get to that level. So he's got to be thinking, well, I got a good game plan. I've had my GAs work on it. I've had my assistant coaches work on it. I came in and picked what I liked and got rid of what I don't. We came up with it as a group. In Jeremy Pruitt's case, he's got, Jim Chaney up there, say, hey,
Yeah.
I got a good offensive coordinator. I got a good defensive coordinator. I got Will Friend, he's got all these great coaches up there. They come up with a game plan. You got to think, okay, that's good enough for Georgia State.
Yeah.
Let's look on. Let's move on to the next one because every coach, like Coach Smart could say, yeah, we're not looking at Notre Dame. But when the Notre Dame week gets here, he will wish that he had more than 5 days to prepare. He'll wish he had 2 weeks. So you have that desire to get ahead, and you think, well, this team, there's no way this team can beat us because we have advantages at every position. We have better coaches. We have better facilities. We're going to win. Next week, I'm going to wish I had 2 weeks, so let's start working ahead. And, yeah, sometimes it bites you right in the butt.
What do you think's going on up there? Because you mentioned the staff that he's put together. He's recruited decently. I mean, everyone kind of knew that Pruitt would be able to recruit. What's going on?
God only knows. I mean, the problem, and we saw this when Mark Richt was here, when there is trouble in the building, it gets 100 times harder to separate fact from fiction. It gets rumors go rampant. And here's the thing, they're not rumors started by Tennessee people. They're rumors started by everybody else who wants to bring Tennessee down.
Wow.
And you have trolls out there a good troll can give you something that sounds believable. Not something that's crazy, but something that's just believable. It's
Sounds
completely
99% true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's 100% fake, but it sounds 99%. So I've had people from inside of that program, outside that program, send me tidbits and things, and I'm like, there's no way that's true.
Yeah.
But what if it is?
I saw a tweet today that somebody's even reporting that Fulmer could be the coach in waiting right now. Those things are not outlandish to the average fan to start taking off.
But before, you had no way of, if somebody was sitting in their kitchen table, in Topeka, Kansas, and they had a good theory like that, there's no way they could get it out.
Yeah.
Now they text a buddy who sends it to another friend in a DM, who sends it to a friend of his at Tennessee, who that guy says, yeah, I heard this, and then they go somewhere else and they see that same joke or troll or whatever in a different message board or on Facebook, and so now they've seen it from 2 or 3 different places. So now all of a sudden, wait, I thought it was a joke. This may be real. So then they pass along as real, and somebody who would never believe it sees it from 5 different places as maybe possibly being real.
Yeah.
And now they believe it. So it's crazy. Nobody knows what's going on up there. Nobody does. But I will tell you this about Jeremy Pruitt when his time here in Athens. Somebody inside this building, we're in the Buttsmere building, said that Jeremy Pruitt has yelled at everybody in this building, from janitors up.
Yeah.
Everyone's had a run-in with Jeremy Pruitt.
Everyone had a Pruitt story.
Exactly. Sometimes that is a mark of it would not surprise me if someone said that about Nick Saban. Would it surprise you?
Yeah, but here's my thing with that difference. And who's to say it didn't happen when Saban was on his way up?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But Saban at this point has earned it. You know what I mean?
That's exactly my point. This was when Jeremy Pruitt was the defensive coordinator here. Okay, he came from FSU, when kind of an odd situation there. He comes to Georgia, is the defensive coordinator here with Mark Richt. They don't quite get along, but you have that situation where it's a my way or the highway mentality. If you don't do it fast enough for Jeremy Pruitt, he yells at you. Or if you don't, I don't see, if you don't read his mind, but if you don't do it the way Jeremy does it, he's going to snap at you. If you're, sometimes, that's, I don't want to say a mark of leadership, but some CEOs and people have that personality. But sometimes it doesn't work, especially if you're maybe seen as an outsider. It's like,
you have to have the results.
You have to have won,
Yeah.
I've said this about Kirby. Sir Kirby sometimes argues with the media. And I'm like, look at the difference. If Pruitt's yelling at the media or having a complaint with them, the people take the media's side. They're like, look, you're 0-2. You can't say crap. But Kirby, he's played for a national title. He's getting his team in the playoffs. Kirby can say whatever he wants. And people say, well, if that's the way Kirby wants it, then that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
And how do you argue with that? It's been the same with Nick Saban. Nick Saban, like you said, has earned it. Whatever he does is okay. If Nick Saban says, look, we have to, before the game, everybody has to go out and kick a puppy. Well, Nick told me to, and so kick a puppy. Just because it's like, look, how many national titles does the man have?
Yeah.
How many championship games has he been to?
No, those results pay off, man. I think it goes back to there's that SEC Media Days, not this past summer, but the one before that. And Aaron Murray called Pruitt out, and Paul Feinbaum took it and ran with it and made it a huge deal. And Murray basically said, I don't trust Pruitt's relationships with higher ups to foster good things for his time in Tennessee.
I didn't know that.
Last year was kind of like a trial run, but then this year you're kind of seeing those results a little bit. And Feinbaum went to Tennessee. Everyone thinks he's this Alabama guy, but Paul Feinbaum went to Tennessee. He was sticking up for Pruitt 2 years ago, and now I think people are starting to see that Aaron Murray might have been onto something.
We were at the Georgia-Florida game, Anthony Dasher and I. The night before the game, the Friday night, when everybody's supposed to go out and have, kick off the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. And I remember he and I working phones feverishly because we had gotten word that Jeremy Pruitt was not going to be the defensive coordinator at Georgia any longer. A mid-season change.
Was this Rick's last year?
Rick's last year or maybe the year before. I think it was Rick's last year, yeah. And then there was that performance where, in the Georgia-Florida game where Jeremy Pruitt stayed in nickel against that running team and would not change because he wanted his guys to set the edge. And there was even a graduate assistant saying, what the hell are we doing?
They looked like the Falcons did against the Vikings on Sunday.
Why? And Pruitt was trying to make a point. And to Pruitt's everlasting credit, after that abysmal performance, he came out and met with the media. Normally the coordinators didn't. He came out and spoke with them. So,
what kind of point was he proving?
That his superstar defensive ends and outside linebackers were not setting the edge, and they didn't. And instead of adjusting his play calling and personnel to it, he just kept making them do it.
Yeah, that's an all-timer right there.
Yeah, and it was just, and I think Florida ran, 6 different plays,
Yeah.
And they won the game. Frustrated, but so there was that issue at the Florida game. Then there was another issue where right beforehand, Jeremy Pruitt had to meet with some of the higher-ups here for issues that he had. So I've known Aaron Murray a long time, since he was a sophomore at Plant High School. Started covering him. He does not say controversial things. He's not trying to get clicks. He is a team captain, always will be. And if he says, I think you have an issue with leadership, this is a guy who's eaten it, breathed it, lived it.
Yeah.
He was here. He knows Georgia. If he says, hey, Jeremy Pruitt, I worry about his relationship with his higher-ups, everybody in this building, as I said, had an issue at one point, or a run-in with Jeremy Pruitt. Yeah. That does not sound like somebody who is winning friends and influencing people.
Yeah, no, you got to read that book. Maybe he should read it. But yeah, I think you're onto something. And Pruitt's one of those guys that, like you said, he came through here. He came through this Georgia program. So obviously, for a couple reasons, Georgia fans are paying attention to his career. Now he's a division rival. Mm-hmm. He hired away Jim Chaney, so people are paying attention to that too, and they have to be excited to see that his offense is not working out so well in Knoxville. So that's something that Georgia fans are going to be keeping an eye on all season. But it is not off to a good start in this second season.
Well, if you look at the entire SEC East, it doesn't look
very
strong.
Looks like garbage.
You know, so if you're a Georgia team who hasn't lost a game to the SEC East in the last 2 years,
yeah,
you got to be thinking as the Bulldogs. You know, he's like, yeah, I think we'll go. You know,
you better make it 3. I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's like I guess the Georgia-Florida game will be the closest test you have.
Yeah, and even that, I know we're basing off of a week 0 matchup.
To be fair, you remember how badly Georgia plays in Jacksonville.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, something always comes
there's something in that stadium or that water that messes with the Georgia football team.
Other than that Rose Bowl season, where they just blew the doors off from start to finish, there's usually something that crops up down there. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the going down the position by position, and looking at where you have advantages, because that's how I run my fantasy football team.
Absolutely.
And kind of gives me a confidence boost that I'm doing the right things. But Georgia has to have that same kind of feeling against Arkansas State this week, like they did against Murray State. What, if anything, are they taking out of last week's win and applying to this week before they get ready for Notre Dame?
Ball security. I know it's a boring coach cliche, and we all roll our eyes when we're, hey, coach, what's your biggest concern about this week? Protecting the damn ball.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, you just.
Well, thanks.
And you just kind of roll your eyes like, well, no, we're looking for something with some more meat to it. But it is the number one. It's the number one thing they practice every day. They go out, they do warm-ups, and then they go straight into ball security drills. Watch the team come out onto the field. This is, the first chance a lot of Georgia fans get to see them warm up. You have the running backs. You line up 3 of them. You put 3 guys behind them. They hold their the back of their jersey, and those first 3 guys take off. The second 3 guys are being pulled behind them, and the entire time they're punching up, trying to punch the ball out from the 3 points of contact that each running back has. The defense works on stripping it during warm-ups. Every game, every practice, it is the most important thing. Coaches run their offense based on it. Kirby Smart is not going to go 4 wide. There's not been one snap this entire season in which Georgia has not had a tight end on the field. Just to give you an idea, they've never gone 4 wides and 1 running back. There's always been a tight end on the field. A lot of times they've been in 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field. Even though they lost a couple tight ends last year, you're thinking, well, who are they going to put out there? Yeah. Charlie Warner and who? Eli Wolf. So you see that Georgia is not going to go spread. Kirby Smart likes the pro style. He likes to run the ball. Fewer chances of turnovers. And I think that if there's anything that they learned last week, it's like, hey, they caused a couple, but they also turned the ball over a couple times.
Yeah.
And as boring as that is, what's the number one thing they're going to take away? I don't know if it's finishing a block or anything like that, or a scheme or adjustment here, adjustment there. I think the top thing is being like, hey, we should not have been even with a Murray State.
Right.
We should have been plus 3 in the turnover margin.
Well, even last year, their turnovers, and I mean sacks too, but their turnovers were low in that
And the
column.
national championship year, up.
Right.
One of the best in the nation. If you want to know how well your team's going to do, look at your season-to-date turnover ratio.
Yeah, and Kirby actually said that today. But
it's boring.
It is boring.
It's so boring, but it's the truth.
Wolf fumbled against Murray State. Stetson Bennett threw a pick six.
Right.
So that's 2 touchdowns right there that led to points. Otherwise, he may have shut him out.
Right.
And then Zamir White had a fumble at Vandy, right?
Right.
So, I mean, they haven't truly
Zamir
protected it as well as they could.
Right. Zamir has this huge run, in that, and turns the ball over. It's like, this isn't good, but it's if you were everyone kind of makes fun of that whole Miami turnover chain thing, and all the teams have started doing it, and Georgia has their spike pads. If you're trying to work on that turnover ratio, you will take a team that's as stoic as a Georgia, and come up with some crazy stunt, some if you're Tennessee, you had this trash can.
What
you
is-
know?
oh, yeah, the trash can.
You have stuff like that. You have people who can sign their names on whiteboards. I mean, everybody's got a gimmick now that Miami started. And you're like, wait a minute, this is how we want our university to be remembered? But you don't care because turnovers are that important.
Well, I think it proves, and I've never really thought about it this way, but it proves just how important it is because they want to give every extra incentive to go out there and get the ball.
Yeah. Hey, look, go in the NFL. You get a pick six, a fumble recovery, go to the
paid.
contract, you get paid.
Yep.
There are ridiculous bonuses. There's a good story for 11 Live. Go through and look at these contracts, find out what these guys make for a fumble recovery.
Man.
And you'll see a guy who.
The Vikings made a lot of money on Sunday.
Yeah, when you look at a guy who's not known as a big hitter, he's maybe a technique guy, a cornerback, and that ball hits the ground or the ball's in the air, and he fights like a mad dog to get it. He's like, ooh, here's my new Beamer. He's going in for it.
That's a car down there.
Exactly. So that's how the NFL treats it because it's that important. Turn the ball over a couple times to Tom Brady, and you're toast.
Yeah. How's Georgia looking on the injury front?
Not good. You're down your left tackle. Your right tackle, Isaiah Wilson. I do not expect him to be back this week. I don't expect him to be back for Notre Dame. So you put Jamari Salyer out there, and he did a good job. And of course, you have Cade Mays who can play that spot, and Ben Cleveland. But at that point, you just can't right now. You can't afford to have another offensive lineman go down, and that's hard sledding in the middle of that line. So one of their top cornerbacks is down. We broke the news earlier today that DJ Daniel had a hamstring injury. Kirby confirmed that in his press conference. So it's just a lot of annoying little injuries that have popped up. But Georgia's so deep. It's not. There's no real issues this week against Arkansas State. Losing if Daniel can't go, and a hamstring can be something that lingers a long time. I think back to poor Jakar Hamilton, the transfer from Georgia Military College, who just could not get over his hamstring issue. Was good enough to play in the NFL. Went and played for Dallas for a couple of years, but just couldn't. We kept waiting for Hamilton to come on at Georgia, but every week he was like, no, that hamstring still tore up. So it's that can be a lingering thing, and when you have an ankle injury like Isaiah Wilson, he's 6'7", 340 pounds. That's a lot of weight to put on that ankle.
That guy almost needs like an ankle and a half on each leg.
He's got big ankles, but it's just, if you get a high ankle sprain like that, it's a pain. So there's some guys that they need to get back. And, of course, Kyrus Jackson has the busted hand. He's out for a few weeks. That is a guy who's there's another fumble.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah,
Yep.
So against Vandy, he catches the ball. He's in the red zone, and he drops the ball right there. That was one that if he was able, and to his credit, he got popped.
Yeah.
I mean, it broke his hand. It's tough to hang on to something when your hand's broken. But
he's a Peach County kid. I know
he's
something bad had to have happened for him to fumble it.
I mean, all those Tariq McGee, all those Peach County kids. We mentioned every week how they're tougher. They're tougher than steel. But
yeah.
So he gets hurt. But your point is, when you lose him, Dominic Blaylock steps up, and Dominic had a big week. So there's always somebody who can come in. And you get some guys back. We saw Rylan Goad out there. This guy that we thought was going to be out with a hand injury for a while. And he made it in the fourth quarter last game. So
yeah. Kirby said every player that was on the field got to play against Murray State.
Yeah, I think there were 80. I think 80 guys got into the game. So that's nuts.
So you talk about that depth. How about these freshmen that Georgia have on this team right now? Have you ever seen a team not only with the talent of freshmen, but the skill set already to put them in a position to play?
It's been a while. I mean, I'd have to go back to some of those classes that Mark Richt had where, he'd have a bad year the year before. And a lot of people said, well, that's going to kill Georgia's recruiting. No, not at all. Because a lot of those freshmen, these high school seniors go, well, I can go to Georgia. They just had, they just went 5-7 or 6-6. I'm going to play right away. And that's what, Rick and everyone was selling them on. Hey, we need help now. And so I'd have to go back and look at some of those classes. But there was one play against Murray State where Nolan Smith, N'Kobe Dean, and Trayvon Walker were all in on the tackle. I think each one of those is a 5-star.
Man.
No, it's two 5 stars and a 4-star.
Okay.
Because Nakobe's just a hair too short.
Oh, whatever.
So, but just point being, but he's right there. He's like on the very cusp of being a 5-star. Those 3 guys make a tackle on a 3rd down, stop the drive. Talk about an idea of things to come. You know, you see George Pickens with a crazy catch. You see Dominic Blaylock doing well. At one point, I looked up in the 4th quarter, and there was Bill Norton, Tymone Mitchell, and Zion Logue. 3 defensive linemen, all from the state of Tennessee, all that guys Pruitt would have liked.
Yep.
Georgia went into Tennessee, took the 3 best defensive linemen in the state, and they were lined up nose, tackle, defensive tackle. Good shot of all 3 of them. I'm like, I don't know if that was done on purpose, but that was just. But again, to your point, here's freshmen who are ready to play. They got out in their first game, and 3 guys across. That's your Tennessee front. So you not only made your team better in depth, but you killed a rival's chances of using them against you. So just across the board, you know, we saw some of the freshmen. Defensive backs getting out there, Tariq Stevenson, you know, guys like that.
Yep.
So it was a pretty impressive group out there. Like I said, contributing right away.
I think George Pickens obviously getting a lot of the hype right away because he's on offense.
Well deserved.
He's at a position where you're going to get a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's earned it more so maybe than a lot of other guys have, just based on his individual effort. He still has a little bit of an edge to him. He had a little bit of
he's got a lot of edge to him.
A personal foul that Kirby got in his face about, and I mean he's got to learn those things. But David Marshall compared him to AJ Green. Other guys comparing him to AJ Green. I mean, that is tough. That's a tough place to be when you're getting compared to a guy like AJ Green, but he continues to live up to it, like with the diving catch, you know, and the one-handed grab we saw in practice. And he can catch anything that, even if it's like 3 feet away from him at the time, he reaches up to catch a pass. I mean, he's earning it. He's performing.
Yeah, we had in our film study that we did at UGA Sports this morning, we showed where he goes to his left. In the past, Jake Fromm on that particular route has almost always thrown a back shoulder pass. And this one goes in front, and George turns around and goes all the way to his left and grabs it. And it was a heck of a catch, you know. It's not the big diving catch. It's not the touchdown catch that everyone saw and everyone raved about. This is just a run-of-the-mill, giant catch radius play that he made, you know. I don't know if that's where the ball's supposed to go. I think it was, you know, but to your point, if it's 3 feet in any direction, he can adjust and go get it. You got to love it as a quarterback. It's like if I'm just off by a little bit, say I'm being chased and I don't quite plant my foot right, or someone tips the ball a little bit as it comes out, here's a guy that's still going to catch it. That just pure throw and catch is what we saw with A.J. Green. Just fling it in his general direction. Mm-hmm. He's going to come down with it. Same thing Javon Wims used to do.
Yep.
Javon Wims had that same ability, and he made Jake Fromm and a lot of Georgia quarterbacks look very good with his ability. So if you got another one like that, the passion though, and Kirby mentioned this after the game. He said, look, George Pickens plays with a lot of passion. And he's got to dial that back down a little bit. We don't want to take that away from him. We don't take the passion out of the game for him, but you can't get up and start jawing at a Murray State defender. You know, you can't get up and jaw at a Tennessee or Florida defender.
Yeah.
Go about it. And I get it. It's that we see this on the 7-on-7s, you know, circuit. You know, guys have a big play, and they want to let everybody know about it, you know, and that's what gets viral. You know, a guy, he waves to a cornerback and then catches a pass, takes him for a touchdown. You know, just that kind of, it's not disrespect. It's just showmanship.
Well, I think it's like, obviously some of this competition is better than what he was facing in high school.
Yeah.
So he's a little amped because he's still performing well against it.
Right.
But how do you compare, like, how do you dial that back in for a guy like that? You want him to have his edge when he's out there, but you can't have him committing stupid penalties.
Exactly. And it's the same with some of the defenders. You know, it's like these guys they're big hitters, and they want to make that big hit. They want to hear that crowd go, ooh, you know, and they want to be on SportsCenter. They want to be on what the coaches tweet out. The coaches last year were tweeting out, hit of the week. You know, they want to make the hit of the week. Well, you see a guy running down the sideline.
But you want to be playing in the second half, too.
You want to be
first
playing
half the next game.
And you're like, hey, I got a clear shot. And you're going full speed. And then right last second, he steps out of bounds. you're already in the air.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, so that's tough. The coaches spend all week trying to amp these guys up to get them excited about playing, because I know it's hard for fans to understand, but sometimes the players are not as excited about the game as you are. Mm-hmm. It is their job. They have fun. They do. But sometimes it's like, I'm not as bouncing off the walls to play in Murray State as I would be to, say, Florida.
Yeah.
And the coaches bring in motivational speakers. They bring in, psychiatrists to kind of figure out, hey, how can we get these kids excited, get them focused? They scream at them, they yell at them, they praise them to get them focused in on the game. You saw what happened in Vanderbilt. 3 quick scores, 21-0. The team zones out.
Yeah.
We got this in the bag. And then all of a sudden, nothing good's happening. So you're trying to keep them involved, keep them into it. And then at the same time, when they do something and they get excited, you're like, oh, well, that's too much. Bring it down a notch. The kids are like, what the hell do you want from me?
That's tough.
Do you want me to be excited and be jumping around and do my job and go full speed, or do you want me to pat a kid on the back and say good try?
Yeah, I don't think there's a perfect way to nail it down, but if you figure it out, good for you. Couple more things before we wrap up. LSU Texas, a big matchup because there were two teams that kind of defined and shaped what Georgia's season was like last year. Sam Ehlinger, after that Sugar Bowl win with the big proclamation that Texas is back. I think everybody wants Texas to be back. I don't think Texas is back just yet. I don't know if you got a chance to watch much of that game on Saturday. But LSU looks legit. And, I mean, dude, Joe Burrow looks like – he looked good last season. But he looks like –
phenomenal.
He looks like a Heisman contender.
He should be. I mean, if you look at his completion percentage, 80%? Then 8 touchdowns to 1 INT. That was a tipped ball.
He's got the swag too, man.
Yeah.
He's got that bounce in his step.
Voters love that. Heisman voters, if you're a Heisman voter and you listen to this, I apologize. The Heisman voters, for the most part, are idiots. Well, I see what they do a lot of times. They go after the biggest name recognition.
And they almost decided, it seems like from the outside looking in, it seems like it's decided by October.
Yeah, so they're like, oh, that's the name, because, again, biggest name recognition. Or if someone has some crazy numbers at the very end of the season, then, that's the guy everyone's talking about right now. Mm-hmm. So, or they watch the Heisman tracker, whatever, ESPN or whoever's making a big, well, that's who I should vote for. There's not enough Heisman voters who are looking at the entirety of college football. And to be fair, it's hard to do so. But when you have that kind of swagger, when you have that name recognition, you go flying right up the Heisman ranking. I mean, the vote. So I would definitely. I don't see why he shouldn't be in the Heisman lead right now. Show me somebody, offense or defense, who's had a better couple games than he has. It's tough. Georgia got blasted by LSU. That was a game they went in by their own admission.
Overconfident.
Overconfident. They're like, they literally thought they had it. That Wednesday practice, their last full practice before that game, they had the best practice of the year.
Wow, you heard that?
Oh, yeah. They're like, we got this. Everything went off without a hitch. Offense looked great. Defense looked great. It was a great practice. They're like, we got this. We're going to steamroll LSU. That was the
in Baton Rouge.
In Baton Rouge. Yeah. That's what they thought. Yeah, and it didn't happen. And then Georgia loses to Texas at the end of the season. Everyone's like, oh, Texas is back. Texas is back against a Georgia team that did not want to be there without DeAndre Baker.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is it fair to really say that kind of prematurely gave Texas that launching point because Georgia did not want to be there?
Georgia did not want to be there. The players didn't want to be there. I spoke to the players like, if they could have gotten their swag and walked out, skipped the bowl practices, I mean, when they lost the SEC championship game, they were done. They were done. Now, you had some young guys that wanted to, show what they could do for the following season, but seniors checked out. Mm-hmm. A lot of juniors, they felt like they had to go and do it. They were not thrilled to be there.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to take anything away from Texas because they look good. I mean, they gave LSU everything they wanted in that game. They have a rock, like Austin's rocking. Mm-hmm. They want Texas to be back, and I think they're close. But I do think, like you said, that Sugar Bowl matchup against Georgia probably started that conversation a little bit too soon. Yeah,
I mean, you look at the fact that you don't have DeAndre Walker out there pressuring guys. Mm-hmm. DeAndre Baker ineligible to play. He says he just didn't want to. I don't know that he was eligible to play at all. So you have a situation where they're two of the best guys on defense aren't there. Now, the guys who wanted to be there, Devod Wilson, Azeez Ojulari, those guys had big games against this vaunted Texas, juggernaut.
True freshman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you could not stop Azeez Ojulari without holding him. And I
Right.
don't want to be the guy, they held my team. No, if you go back and look at the photos I took, they're just,
Yeah.
Azeez was held ridiculously. And, of course, the refs, they're like, hey, it's a bowl game. The refs are, like.
They're checked out too.
Yeah, it's like, we got this last game.
They didn't make it to the playoffs either.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to the playoffs. We'll be at Harrah's here in about 3 hours. Let's get out of here. So you had a situation where the guys who wanted to be there showed up big. You had some freshmen, sophomore, juniors. who
Brian
played
Harrion.
big. Exactly.
Yeah.
But then the guys who said, look, my starting spot is assured for next year, or I'm a senior and I'm done, And there was like, hey, we're gonna win this for the seniors. Did not feel legitimate. It felt like going through the motions. That's what you say before that game. We want to send the seniors out on a right note. It didn't have that sincerity or that just pure adrenaline behind it that you normally hear.
It felt like a New Year's Six bowl game in the playoff era. I think that's pretty fair to say.
Exactly.
For a Power 5 school.
So Texas may be back, but not yet. They're not at the SEC level yet.
Who's your top four right now? I know it's really early still, but based on what we've seen right now, who's making the playoffs?
Clemson versus Clemson, taking on Clemson, and Clemson's backups.
Clemson 1 through 4.
No, I would go Clemson, Alabama, right now LSU.
Yeah.
And Georgia. I know it's horrible to come out and say 3 SEC
Well,
teams.
it's
but
right now,
It's right now. These are the teams I have seen, and I've seen what they can do. There's no way you're going to get them in there. Hell, you might not even be able to get 2 SEC teams in there, but for body of work and what I'm familiar with, and why are you at Georgia? They haven't played anybody. It's true. They've not played anybody.
Yeah.
But I've seen what they put on the field, and that's no laughing matter. You got a quarterback in Jake Fromm, that running back group, that offensive line. You're going to score points. Some of the biggest questions we had, wide receivers and tight ends, those have been answered. The secondary looks amazing. They're getting pressure from the edges and in the middle. That's a pretty good football team. Alabama's, of course, loaded, but who's Alabama played?
Exactly.
So,
is Duke better than Vanderbilt?
Right.
I don't know.
So,
I don't know if we know that yet.
Duke's pretty good. But you see, my point is right now, those are my top teams. If I have to pull an SEC team, I might put it in Ohio State.
Really?
Ohio State.
I might sub out Georgia for Oklahoma, just because I do want to see Georgia play better competition.
Yeah.
I think we've already seen. To me, the biggest question mark was Jalen Hurts for Oklahoma, and Lincoln Riley's kind of turned him into a beast already. But it's early, and I'm sure Georgia will jump back in there. But as you're saying though, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, all in that mix right now. I mean, if there's any combination where those teams go undefeated and one goes 11-1 or whatever, sub it out however you want to, it's going to be another tough decision for the playoff committee.
Tough.
But
you imagine a situation where Georgia goes 12-0, loses to Alabama in the SEC title game.
And LSU's only losses to Alabama.
Alabama's only lost. Yeah. LSU's only lost to Alabama. They're 11-1, and Alabama's 12-0.
Well, it might make it easier for people, and they just kick LSU and Georgia out, keep Bama in. So I don't know. It's going to be fun to see though. But
if there's a way for Georgia to get screwed in the playoff, it will be devised. I guarantee it.
No, we've seen it time and time again, and
if there's any way,
once it expands to 6 or 8,
they'll be screwed twice.
That's how it goes.
That's how it goes in Athens.
All right, my man. Listen to Roddy on UGA Sports Podcast as you can every week. We'll catch you next week.
Yeah, and that until LSU or Georgia or Alabama lose, whichever happens first, that's going to be the conversation. You're not going to get 3 teams in the playoff from the same conference, but are you going to get 2? And what's it going to look like, say, if LSU beats Alabama, and then Alabama has 1 loss, and then Georgia beats LSU in the SEC championship? What do you do? what do you do then? I mean, it is going to be fascinating, and that's just one hypothetical. It's going to be fascinating to keep our eyes on that. But for right now, you just got to worry about those Red Wolves, man. 1 week at a time. And when you got Red Wolves coming after you, baby, you better keep your head on a swivel, boy. So that's Georgia game week, and hope y'all enjoy it. Hope y'all have a great rest of your week. Only a couple days left of real serious intensive labor. And, honestly, I like to keep this thing pretty lighthearted if you couldn't tell, but cannot end the episode without just encouraging everybody on the anniversary of September 11th, 2001. Just remember, if you were there, if you saw it happen, if you were around when it happened, just remember how we acted as a country that day and how we looked at each other as Americans and humans. In any possible way, any opportunity you have to see that in your neighbor today and have those feelings again, these are tough times for people that just don't want to talk to each other because of one little thing. They find one little thing, one excuse to not like their fellow American or not like another person, period. And it's that easy. Don't be that way today. Be better than that today. Hope y'all can find it within yourselves to do that. And if you weren't around, listen, I know that it's 18 years ago now, which I cannot believe. I remember it well as one of those things that will stick with me in our country's history forever. But if you weren't there, talk to somebody that was. And talk to them about how our country was before that day, what it's been like after, and try to find your own way to make it better than it was before. So with that, I really hope y'all have a great day. Hope y'all have a great week. Have a great college football weekend. And check out our other episodes of Look Alive Podcast. The one before this one, we talk more about the Falcons and what they have to work on, and the Braves as well. This episode that comes out each Wednesday is more so Georgia, because I'm kind of on that beat each and every Monday. So it's more Georgia-centered, but we have more content in the days prior that talk about all your other teams as well. So check those out. And be sure to like 11 Alive Sports on Facebook. Follow it on Twitter. My name's Wes Blankenship, Wes _ the letter N, the word ship on social media. And download that 11 Alive app. 11 Alive is where Atlanta speaks. That's our mantra. So speak to us. Tweet at us. Tell us anything that you want to have included in this podcast, and we'll put it in the next time we record. Also, vote for the Team 1-1 Game of the Week. A lot of great high school coverage, a lot of great high school content over there. Pick the game that you want us to go cover that week. Maybe your team's on it. Go check it out and go vote. All right, y'all. That's a wrap for today's episode of Look Alive Podcast. Y'all take care.